Okay, great. Cool. So we're really seeing this as having three different sections today. The first section is we want to provide you all with an update on the responses from the survey that got sent out. We received 48 responses on the survey, which I think is a really great sample size. And we want to go through sort of the key considerations and key concerns that were brought up in the survey, give you an idea, of how we're thinking about the clubs and orgs fair based on sort of the survey results. We're not going to go through the sort of idea that we had in the survey itself. So Jen, I don't know if you could pop in the chat if people want to review it. The link to the, not to put you on the spot, but the link to the Google form, it's still live. So you can send that to folks just so they can review it. And then we've got some questions for you, and hopefully you have some reactions and comments and questions for us. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. Jen, are we good?
Yeah, I'm looking for the form to put in the chat.
Can someone tell me if you can see my screen that says
Club and Orgs Fair Plan? I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay, so so this question, this is where we're going to start. Given the description that we provided of the Clubs and Orgs Fair, should we proceed with plans for an on-campus fair? Majority said yes, 58.3%. 27.1% said maybe, and 14.6% said no. Is out of 48 responses. And in terms of key considerations, first, and these some of them are word for word, some of them are paraphrased for brevity. So an in-person fair allows people to feel the community of Bates and to help individuals understand if a club's vibe is right for them. It may make first years attending the first club meeting less intimidated. It might make that environment more welcoming to first years. And the fair gives less popular clubs, or clubs perhaps that individuals might not initially see themselves in, the ability to shine. Furthermore, someone pointed out, and I thought it was an apt observation, the plan as stated for the in-person fair may do less for recruitment, but more for building a sense of community. And this was said in the context of the plan being, if you have one person at a table, it might not be as exciting, perhaps, as the quote-unquote normal Clubs and Orgs Fair. However, it would still help first years feel that they're part of an interconnected community. And then it would also, and this is the final key consideration, it would set a precedent for how larger scale events could be held safely on campus. So among all these bullet points, most of the responses that were sort of more, I guess, quote unquote, positive considerations fell along these lines. In terms of concerns with an in-person Clubs and Orgs Fair, there were several responses that cited risk involved with bringing folks together, even with observing social distancing, and a suggestion that perhaps the process could be as effective if just sign-up sheets for each club were emailed to first years, and perhaps the sheets could include videos people made or descriptions of each club. Only one person per station, as I noted earlier, may make the event a dull event compared to past years. That an in-person fair does not permit individuals studying remotely to participate. And I take that comment as sort of both on the attendee side and the club leader side. I know some people who are joining the call today have elected to study remotely. Some concerns about how efficient this would really be. How efficient, hosting it across multiple time slots and dividing clubs up and dividing first years up, how efficient really be to get clubs acclimated to the club life at Bates. That it won't be the same as usual, to the point of what's the point? that some folks saw that the essence of the clubs and orgs fair would be altered so greatly under this plan, as it was outlined in the survey, that it wouldn't even be worth doing. Already noted that there were concerns about risk generally. Point that's really valid, and honestly a point that I don't think that we had fully considered when we sent out the survey. Concerns about noise and maybe having a shout from 6 feet away through a mask. We know that the clubs and orgs fair in a normal environment is very noisy, but when you consider putting 100 people in and around a tent, you can imagine, and especially at 6 feet away, you can imagine that it could become difficult for folks to hear each other in that environment. And then finally, there was concern, given that having shared items of any kind is discouraged under the college's COVID-19 guidelines, there's concern that contact information recording may be difficult or inaccurate in this environment. I did want to make a point of clarification as well. A few people thought that we were proposing to do this after classes had started, or perhaps that we would be scheduled against classes, and that's not the case. Our plan is to do this when classes are not happening. So if we do it after classes start, it would occur during times when classes were not actually happening concurrently, and I want to make that clear. Moving on to the question about the virtual clubs and orgs fair, if folks thought that it would be worth pursuing. Thanks for putting that in the chat, Mason, and we'll get to that later on. And folks, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to drop some notes in the chat so we can consider them. So would a virtual fair be worth pursuing? Overwhelmingly, 75% of folks said yes, it would be worth pursuing. In terms of key considerations, responses fell into two main proposals. The question actually, when it came to the virtual fair, simply asked, if you answered yes, you want to see a virtual fair happen, how do you envision it occurring? And folks had two major proposals. One for asynchronous, which basically would look like beefing up via integration of photo and video media, and a revision of maybe the club blurbs and highlighting the club directory. And then synchronously engaging via video call. Another consideration is a lot of words, is that some students may not want to partake in large crowd and gathering activities, regardless of if they're on campus. And so having a virtual fair will cater for a larger audience. Since the club fair will not happen at the same time with every club, having one platform to showcase every club at one time and the information all at once may be convenient. Someone suggested perhaps we could list clubs that were willing to participate in the virtual fair with a Zoom link attached to each, so that students could click the link and chat with club leaders and sort of in a quote unquote, I think they characterize it as a speed dating style, could jump among different club Zoom rooms and engage as they want. And I think that this is, yes, this is essential. Oh, there's a speed dating comment. So this is all the same thing. And there was a question of perhaps having an online sign-up sheet to gauge interest. And I assume that would be both for student attendees as well as club leaders to do it. In terms of key concerns singular, someone had suggested, or actually a few folks who responded to the survey had suggested perhaps doing a group Zoom call and allowing folks to highlight for several minutes. However, we have well over 80 BCSG recognized clubs, not counting the club sports that are advised by athletics, as well as organizations like Chase Hall Programming Board and the Debate Council. And even limiting each of those to 2 minutes apiece would render a 3 to 4 hour stream. So at least from our perspective, we're not sure that doing a group Zoom call would be the most efficient way to host a virtual clubs and orgs fair. Jen, did you want to talk through our conclusions?
Yes. And like I said before, if I am too noisy with my background noise, please tell me. So we have a couple current conclusions. There's still some key considerations to get through regarding an in-club fair. It's clear that both would be possible and would be beneficial, even if it would feel really different. So that's kind of the theme of the year. We want to make sure we can still do things that we normally would do, but it is going to be different because of these things. So we're looking at both options to be able to have everyone access all of these clubs and organizations. If we do it in person, it would likely be on Monday, the 31st of August, and Tuesday, the 1st, and virtually would be the evening of the 2nd. So historically, the Clubs and Orgs Fair, as you all might know, is usually on the first day of classes that night. So we would be spreading it out over the course of those 2 days and then doing the virtual one that evening on Wednesday. So that's kind of what we're thinking right now.
So that's sort of the lay of the land as we see it based on the survey. I want to turn to you all to get your feedback. I'm looking at Mason's comment right now. Worried about the current setup leading to higher people watching and, for out front. Yeah, that's a very club-specific example. It's a great consideration for you all to think about as you sort of decide how to engage with first years. And you know, we want to make this as flexible as possible. Clubs and Orgs Fair has never been mandated, of course. And so, you know, I think offering both a virtual and an in-person fair this year will enable clubs to pick and choose based on the needs of its members and its overall outlook as to how they want to engage with first years and other prospective club members. And that's a great point, Mason. So any initial reactions, comments, questions?
We are open to all the ideas at this point. Also, we want to make this as doable as possible, considering everything.
So I will say I was the one who wrote the speed dating thing, and I do think something important about the club fair is the ability of people to interact and talk to the members of the clubs, talk to the people who are at the booths, and I feel the one of the time system, I feel like almost doing a virtual thing where online might allow people to better communicate, because I feel like if we're going one at a time, it's going to be very put your name down, speak to the next person, which probably won't give people a great understanding of what the club is like, given a lot of the reasons why people thought we should have an in-person club fair were based around it's important to get the vibe of the club, to get the feel of the campus. And I'm worried that it will feel like going to a fast food chain. You walk up, you do what you do, and then you leave. I'm worried it's going to feel very mechanical.
It's a great point.
And I think if we were to do something virtual where you could actually have more extended conversations, that might be more beneficial in the long term for clubs and for building a community.
Yeah, so building off that, I think the synchronous option before us is offering a menu of links. I don't think that doing a group call with like 100 student clubs and organizations would be a productive use of anyone's time, or really, Zach, get at what you're saying about sort of getting a good feel for a single club's environment. I guess my question with relation to that would be, do you all see, and I guess there's at least two options, there may be more, and please chime in if you have more ideas about how this could look, but do you see doing, for example, an extended week of, you know, let clubs sort of pick and choose what time they want to schedule their meeting throughout the course of, and I'm just spitballing here, let's say it's the first full week of classes, so the week of September 6th, and call it Clubs and Orgs Week and help promote, you know, the times that clubs are hosting their engagement sessions? Or do you think it would be better to sort of say, okay, on September 2nd between 7 and 10 p.m., clubs are going to be hosting their calls, and just say, this is the time that you should host your call, and let first years and prospective club members jump amidst all the calls at the same time.
Can I just start talking? Is that okay if I just jump in?
Absolutely.
Okay. Also,
Yeah.
I feel so bad. I'm like, where? This
You're
is
good.
a little different than Zoom. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
but it's good. This is great. I think if I was a little wee first year again, it might be a little less intimidating if they were on different nights. And I don't know if this is too much work for you guys, but maybe if it was organized so that like one night was focused solely on like club sports or like club sports and like clubs that focus around movement, and then another day was about like mental health and maybe like Sunshine Society. So maybe if it was like categorized almost for like a couple nights, and maybe it could be more like we kind of advertised that it was like clubs and orgs week as opposed to one night. And I feel like also like if someone has like something going on with their dorm or they're getting something delivered or blah 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 happens and they miss it, like it's like that whole night they're like, oh, I missed out on that. So maybe if it was spread out, it would just be a little less intimidating. But that's just my opinion. So
That's a great call. I think that the logical category we would divide it by are the categories we already have clubs classified into. One key consideration is, would it be beneficial for the clubs or sort of harmful to have all the identity clubs on just one night? That's sort of like something that sort of we are grappling with. We don't have an answer for in Campus Life.
I actually think it might
That
be...
and like
Oh,
think
Zach was
about.
talking in general.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I like the idea of elongating it and making it so people can get on just so that life doesn't just interfere with their ability to. But I actually think one of the great things about the club fair is having all of these different clubs happening at the same time kind of depressurizes it if you wanted to try something or go to a booth or that is not typically what you would do, because then you kind of have the ability to leave. So if they're all kind of on one night, and let's say you've never played squash before, but you want to maybe go on the squash club, if it's all in one night, it's kind of accepted that you might leave after a couple of minutes, and there won't be this pressure to stay. And I hope that if we have all the athletic clubs or my club, the Bates Dems, that it might be less intimidating to engage with us if politics or sports was not your thing. If there is an easy opt-out, like, oh, it's assumed it's speed dating, we're going to leave, so that no one feels too intimidated or stuck on each individual call.
That's a good point. Thanks. Others?
I think it's cool to like have a bunch of things that you can jump between. I feel like it might be a little awkward. It might feel awkward to leave each call. Like particularly if you have to like, in Zoom, you have to like be in a waiting room and then let in. Like it might feel like kind of awkward to be in there and then be like, actually, never mind, bye. Like, I don't know how that would work. Because when you're at the club fair normally, you can just kind of walk away and it's not so bad.
That's true.
Being like, okay, I'm gonna leave the meeting now. Like, So I don't know. I don't know what solution that has, but.
I mean, I think some of it would be, framing expectations for both club leaders and first years that like people are going to drop in, they're going to drop out. You should feel free to do that anytime, and people aren't going to be offended if you're there and you're like, I'm out. This doesn't sound right for me. Peace, y'all. Like, and we can help with that framing.
I'm glad Emma said that because I wouldn't have thought of that, but I could totally be like, and like Zooms are kind of like if there's like a long pause and then you're like, bye, like that could definitely get a little funky. And then like one of the other ideas that was in like the slideshow that you guys put together with all like the input from the survey like the idea of someone suggested having like a club description or like a short video people could watch. I also wonder if like that would maybe even work better than having like infinite Zoom links for people to join, and maybe instead they had like there was a 2 or 3 minute video they could watch that like a club leader had done, like describing the club's goals and like values, and it was like the spiel that club leaders would normally like yell in your face at the club fair with a lot of energy, as opposed to like, let's say like as president of Sunshine Society, if I keep having new people come to the Zoom with me, do I like restart the spiel each time? And like, what if one person's been there like longer? But I totally like both ideas, but I'm glad that we're entertaining like the virtual club meeting or club fair.
Yeah, yes, those are great points. And something that I thought was interesting, it wasn't by any means like a widespread remark, but some of the responses about sort of what you're describing, Mary, sounded very similar to what we already provide via the club directory, and what we admittedly only sent one email out about a month, maybe a little bit more than that ago, about clubs sort of recording videos and providing photos. So I'm going to share my screen again just to show you what this looks like. So this is the club directory. I have it sorted by alphabet. The directory by category looks the exact same. Every club has, at the very least, the ability for individuals to join their Google groups via a direct link. So you can just direct folks to the club directory, which is at bates.edu/club/directory, to join your Google group, otherwise known as your listserv. Clubs that have provided it, like the ballroom team here, there's Emma. Like the ballroom team here have, they have a link to their Facebook page, as well as they put together a video to welcome first years that we have posted on here. And they've also provided a bunch of photos, and we put those in a gallery for folks to sort of go through. And then they really, I believe they updated their blurb on here also a little bit. Yes, they did, because they mentioned the pandemic here. So they definitely have updated it recently. So like, I think this is a great example of ways that we can leverage the club directory in addition to whatever we plan for synchronous engagement virtually. Maybe this looks like Campus Life putting out another call and making it very clear that like, hey, this is a really, really great way to get first years involved, and here's how to do it.
No, I'm glad you pointed that out to me. That was very humbling, because I should really familiarize myself with that site. Also, Emma is such a queen. Like, I'm like looking, I'm like, wow, this is so professional. Yeah, no, I'm really glad you pointed that out. And I think also like, and maybe this is just because I only really got into clubs like this past year, but I feel like not many people are super aware of that like site, or like maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just like another email could be sent out or something, because I think that's like such a good resource. And especially if like someone's like first year and they're like a little socially awkward and they don't want to like go to a Zoom or like go to this, that's like a little less commitment where they can do it on like their own terms, sort of, to like go to a page. So yeah, I'm glad I saw that.
And I will say another way that first years are likely going to try to engage with you all is via Bates Engage. We included a portion, a how-to, in our part of first year orientation to let folks know how to find you guys you all, I should say, guys, it's not gender neutral, to find you all via Bates Engage. So like, and we're going to be providing a little bit of training in the club orientation that we're developing as well, so that you all know sort of like how to get engaged. I was trying not to say that word, Jen. But how to get engaged with Bates Engage and understand sort of like how first years are likely going to be using it to interact with your club. And while we know that like many of you all probably have ways of interacting that aren't provided by Bates or by Campus Life, Google Groups and Bates Engage groups are great ways to get first years and other prospective members involved. Any other? We talked a lot about virtual. Maybe we could talk about the in-person and sort of like how we're all feeling / thinking about it.
Can I make a comment about one of the suggestions we had earlier about in person?
Yep.
Something that we, like Nick mentioned about having all the same type of group in one, like in one shift, and the issues that could come up with that. I think something that's really cool about what we normally do with in-person fairs is like there might be a club, like I think Ben is on the call. I'm going to pick on Circus Club. Like I might not have ever considered doing circus stuff before until I like came to the club fair, and maybe I came to the club fair because I wanted to do club volleyball, but then I found like that I was actually kind of good at juggling and I wanted to do that instead. So it's like if we divide it up into categories, I worry that people are going to miss out because maybe I only go to the sports one, so I only see volleyball, and then I don't get to go to the arts one, so I miss out on Circus Club. So I think once we divide it, I don't know if we do it in categories. Maybe we like just do it random or something like that. I don't know. That's just like one of the considerations to think of as we think about an in-person one. I just don't want students to miss out on all of the amazing opportunities that you all have for them.
I would also add, not that this is by any means a settled issue, but one of the reasons that we had said that clubs could register for the day and time that they want, in addition to the considerations that we already sort of laid out, and this actually was in a few different survey responses. You know, some clubs aren't going to have a lot of members on campus, and making it more flexible for club leaders to choose what works with their schedule could actually enable more folks to participate from a club leader perspective.
Yeah, and like, just given my club being Faith STEMs, like one of our principal goals is like voter turnout, and being in it, I feel like it would be wildly unbeneficial for certain clubs to be relegated to clubs like them, since our goal is to reach everybody, not just people who have already been who are already with who already might want to join us. And I feel like I worry about there being a higher barrier of entry to going to certain clubs if everything's sorted, rather than just happening to see it.
Something else, that's a great point, and that reminded me, and I don't know if we necessarily spelled this out, but the goal for this would be, however this manifests in person, that first years would be fundatoried into it by their JAs and would travel with their JAs to their assigned time, with the intent of exposing as many folks as possible to as many clubs as possible. Something that actually came up as I'm thinking about all this in the survey as well was a concern about, you know, some clubs really, every club really interacts with the Clubs and Works Fair in a normal year in a different way, right? Everyone has a different tack, everyone has a different thing that they're trying to do. Most probably clubs have sign-up sheets. Others just want to interact and say, here's when our meeting time is, we hope you show up. Squeezing all that, and maybe, I don't know if I'd characterize it as putting pressure on one club leader, but putting that all on one person can't possibly encapsulate the same kind of activity and excitement that the normal Clubs and Orgs Fair provides. And so there were suggestions about increasing the number of club leaders, even to just 2. And I want to say, like, the reason why things aren't settled yet is what this comes down to right now for campus life. It's a numbers game in terms of attendance. The state of Maine mandates that we can't have more than 100 people in a single gathering. So if you have, right now we're planning on having 30 tables set up in a tent, right? If you have 30 tables, it means 30 clubs, and you multiply that by 2, you're at 60. Even if we could figure out 6 feet of social distancing, that means only 40 people could show up for 30 clubs at a time, which might encourage more one-on-one interaction. But it's more like, basically like what I want to do now, once we sort of fully get all the feedback from you all, is go back and number crunch some models and say, if we have this many club leaders and this many attendees, what does this look like? How many time slots would we have to offer? You know, not every club does always engage in Clubs and Orgs Fair, but most do. You know, gauging interest for even clubs to attend. And really what it could look like, not saying it will look like this, but what it could look like is us having, 2 to 3 spaces on campus that we're running at the same time. So then perhaps we only need to use 15 tables under the tent. We could have more club leaders. You know, one could imagine, for example, and some of this is weather dependent, we'd have to consider that as well. But, you know, if we have the tent, perhaps also alumni walk, perhaps also the library quad, and we sort of spread it out and encourage folks to move among them during their time slot, we could potentially accommodate more club leaders and more first years at once. But we still need more number crunching to do. So it's all sort of still up in the air from that perspective.
Well, I think, I don't know, I'm going to be remote in the fall, so I won't actually be here. But I think that for me, there is still value in an in-person, like, just show of clubs, because visually it's so much more impressive if you just see a bunch of people, like, actively, like, have their posters and they're, like, promoting their club. It, like, is a bigger thing. I think that is even better if we have more than one person at each table, because then it's not just like, you know, one person sadly by themselves waiting for people to interact with them. But I think even if it is just one person, just like the visual impact of all the clubs is really valuable in just like first year engagement.
We could do it so the in-person version is more of like a walkthrough, so you're really just like seeing things and you don't get to interact one-on-one, but it's more like, it's like almost like a museum exhibit where the club leaders are actually there, but it's like, here's this thing we do, here's this thing that we do, and then from there we say, here's when we'll be doing the remote, here's when we'll be remote and able to like talk more one-on-one with you over Zoom, because then we could kind of shuffle people through quicker, and almost get both things and kind of put in an advertisement for the remote one as well.
Just a quick question about that, which is, I guess, Mason, I'm wondering if you're, or I don't know, a concern, maybe not a question, is I'm worried that I feel like what you're suggesting, or do you feel like it overlaps with the club website a lot? Because I feel like when you have like the club website, it is all of that information, and I'm wondering what purpose doing all of this work to set up a museum walk and not be able to interact with people would do in addition to that. So I'm curious to hear if you think that it would do something more than that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I definitely appreciate it. I don't think it would be like purely museum, and obviously there would be some interaction just because we are college students. I meant that more as demonstrative. But I know, like, at least for me, being able to physically move around the space and visually see things and see the people that I would be interacting with would have a very different impact from just like scrolling through a website. Yeah.
Yeah, or I got you. That makes sense.
I think it gets at, the idea gets at something that I've personally been grappling with, which is how do you ensure that social distancing is being maintained? And how do you control entry to the space? You know, we're going to have this tent up, right? We have no guarantee that it's going to be able to be fenced off in any way. So it's just going to be sort of open air. And one can imagine that, you know, if folks haven't seen each other over a summer, upper class students coming up, sort of, how do you keep track of attendance in a space that's not cordoned off in some way? I mean, you can't. So I'll just get to the answer to that. So that kind of, Mason, that kind of gets at that question in terms of like, you could literally like have the JA serving as the quote unquote tour guide, and not to be, I don't use this allegory in any demeaning way, but could be leading their ducklings, you know, spaced out 6 feet apart. You know, it's an idea for sure. Molly, I saw what you put in the chat. That's a really intriguing thing. So, are you thinking that QR code could link up to a club's Google group?
Yeah, it could either like sign them up to the email list, or maybe like the Bates. I don't know how Bates Engage works, but maybe like the Bates Engage page or something.
Yeah, Bates Engage not going to work that way.
Okay.
I'm a little salty about that personally.
Well, then the email list.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's plenty of websites out there where you can literally just take a URL and convert it into a QR code, and I think that's a great idea, and would actually get at the problem of signing folks up a little bit. I think that, and also, you know, I believe that as managers, so every president of a club is the manager of their Google group, at least as managers, and perhaps as just members, folks would be able to see the date and sort by the date someone joined. So you could actually tell who joined from the Clubs and Orgs Fair if you wanted to narrow down to a list of new folks you wanted to engage with and contact just those individuals directly. So I think that's an incredible option, one that has been floated at last year's Clubs and Orgs Fair, and none of the brilliant minds in campus life came up with it. So thanks for providing that, Molly.
So 2 things. First, with the in-person club fair, would the idea be to have people going to whatever table they would like? Because I could see that being very difficult with social distancing if people are wandering around the tent, waiting. Like, or we'd have a system where people could be at lines in certain clubs. Because if people aren't like strictly going in a circle, it's going to be pretty difficult to get people to properly social distance and not clump up at whatever the more popular club is at whatever the time section is. The second thing, I thought about the QR codes, and I worried that where would we put them? Because we put them on the table, now people have to get close to the table where the leaders are, and now there might be a mad rush and like a clumping towards where the QR codes are.
If we made them big enough, that's a really great point. If we made them big enough, if we printed them on really anything bigger than 8.5 by 11, even 11 by 17, theoretically they could stand far enough away to scan that code. Yeah, Ben, that's a great point. I mean, the other thing too, question actually for folks, we were thinking of, and I don't know how we'd accomplish this just yet, but we were thinking of providing, you know, big placards for folks to understand where each club was. But it occurs to me that clubs are very creative, and if we gave them enough time to make their own signs, that they would probably rather just do that. Like, what are y'all thinking about that?
I think a map is a great idea, particularly if this is kind of like a museum walk type deal. Then like you can be like, okay, like I looked at the map. I'm particularly interested in like, you know, I don't know, like I'm particularly interested in chemistry club. So I know that it's like coming up. Like that's super useful to me, I think. You know, because then you can like have it in your head what you're here for. And even if you're going in a prescribed circle, you can still like know where to look and what to do.
And something else, I think that's a great point, Emma, and something else that would probably help is for us to zone out the tent for the JAs at least, so that they understand, hey, when you first arrive, this is where we want to meet you up, and we'll talk, and like we can have staff there to talk to the JAs in the first years to sort of explain how it'll work and say like, we will tell you when to rotate to the next side of the tent. And this is where, if you don't want to engage, feel free to go off into the grass for a couple minutes while you wait for your first year center to move to the next side of the tent. But maybe that's how we try to control it. And hopefully it'll be a beautiful day.
Yeah, honestly. Nick, do you want to explain, like, I don't know if you already did this, what setup we were thinking in terms of where we were going to put the tables? Because I think if we're envisioning the tent, folks are going to walk on the outside, right? Not on the inside.
Yeah, the concept is that the tables are facing outside, that only club leaders are under the tent itself. And I mean, obviously they would be a little bit, they wouldn't be right on the edge necessarily. So, but that first years would be engaging from the outside of the tent in rather than the inside of the tent out. So first years would be walking around the tent, not in the tent. And that's just to ensure as much social distancing as possible, because no matter how big a tent is, once you get a certain number of people in there, entropy increases is the way I would put it for y'all science people.
Also, I was thinking, like, if the perimeter that people are walking around is wide enough away from the tables, like 10 or 15 feet away from the tables, there can be like little soccer cones or like markers on the ground that are 6 feet, maybe two of them. So 1 6 feet away from the table and 1 12 feet away from the table. And then that's like your little cue to go up to a table in addition to having a map. So you're like, hey, I want to go to Circus Club. I see that it's over here on this side of the tent. They walk around the wide perimeter and they like line themselves up at those markers on the ground. And if they see that 2 people are already waiting at the markers, then they go look at another club and come back.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. And it would be even to add a little bit of, literally a little bit of color to that idea, making sure the cones were different colors so we could easily explain, hey, the orange cone is the one in the front, the yellow cone is the one in the back. If there's someone at both cones, please go pick around a soccer ball or something. It occurs to me that maybe it would be good, Jen, for us to think about outdoor things that even the owls could be doing just adjacent to the tent, so that there'd be something for folks to engage with, even if they didn't want to. Yeah.
It could also be those little dot things that you like sit on in preschool.
I'm going to date myself, but I have no idea what you're talking about. I was last in preschool 25 years ago. So if you could explain.
They're just like
Maybe
little
like
circles.
little rugs, little carpet circles,
Okay.
or stickers. I don't know.
Yeah. They're like kind of rubbery and plasticky. I don't know.
They were honestly designed for this purpose.
Quite literally, we are going back to our elementary days this semester.
Oh dear. Let me see. We talked about that stuff. Oh, question. I don't know what this is going to look like yet. Obviously, you have to do number crunching. How long would you all perceive would be too long for club leaders to spend staffing a table? Because I think
Would
we can.
be allowed to like rotate people, or is it just going to be like the same person for the whole time period?
Well, that's one of the considerations, right? So if we were to allow rotation of people, what we would likely want to do is take maybe a half-hour break and let custodial come through and do a quick sanitization of all the tables and chairs, and then let the next full. I mean, I don't think y'all ever use the chairs. We're not going to do chairs probably, but do a quick sanitization of the tables, and then restart. So I guess the question is, how long do you think one person would be willing to staff a shift?
I think that I think each club leader is gonna have to hype up the energy way more than we even did for the indoor one. Because it's gonna be one person, it's gonna feel a little subdued, so it's gonna need to be like high energy. So I think an hour-ish, maybe a bit more, without stopping, probably is around where it'd be best, especially because there'll be a lot of added pressure of make sure everything be social distance. It's going to be the high energy and also like lots of pressure. I also kind of head out. I'm really sorry, but I'll watch that when
No worries, Zach. Thanks for contributing everything that you have. It's been really helpful. And we're going to post for anything. We're probably going to wind up in a few minutes anyway. So we're going to post everything that you miss anyway shortly after this. My hope would be from a logistics and planning person that we could do 90 minutes to 2 hours per person, which I know is a lot. See, Emma's face just went, ugh. Like that would be the hope, because I mean, you know, I think that we can, if it needs to be shorter than that per person, we can think through what sanitization might look like, and maybe we provide sort of a sanitizing station by certain sections of tables and just ask club leaders to help us out with that. But so Alice says an hour at most, and Zach, no wait, that was Zach. Zach said an hour at most, so is that how we're sort of feeling?
I think 2 hours sounds like a really long time by yourself at a table. But like, I mean, I feel like we're gonna do what we gotta do, but it would be nice if we could sanitize the table in between and switch people out. Even if that's like the club leaders doing it themselves, like wiping it down and then someone else coming in, rather than like, you know, everyone leaving at the same time and then sanitizing and then leaving. It would be nice to have that flexibility.
I feel like it depends on the club and also how many first years are there, because I know when like the club fair starts dying down is when I usually start wanting to leave. So I know I definitely staffed a table by myself for 2 hours before at club fair, but it's usually when like it gets really late and like all the first years start leaving that I'm like, okay, I'm done too. That makes sense.
Mason, I see what you put in here. Yeah, that's an interesting consideration. I don't know that it's going to be all that common.
Yeah, I just figured I'd put that out there because I know that that's something that Outfront has. Yeah.
So we're getting down to the last few minutes. Is there anything burning that you all have wanted to ask? Something that you think we should definitely consider? I know that like I know that I've gotten a lot of incredible ideas here, and I feel super energized. I have to admit, I came into this call not quite sure how an in-person would roll out, and I have a much better sense of how it could happen. So thank you for that. But anything burning? Anything you want to talk about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this is not really related to the club fair, but you were talking about how some of the club leaders were able to update the page on the Bates website.
Yep.
How will we go about doing that?
Yeah, so if you go to bates.edu/clubs, under the menu item that says club directory, there's actually a directory update form, and you can just submit it there and we'll take care of it for you.
Awesome, thank you.
That's a good question, yeah. And we'll probably send out an email tomorrow with both the YouTube link and an urgent advisement to please submit your club directory updates, because I think that will be a great asynchronous way for first years and other prospective club members to engage.
And first years are probably already creeping on the website too. Like,
let me tell you,
right.
First years are resourceful. We have not said a peep to them about Bates Engage yet, and we've got about 10 of them who already have accounts activated. So they'll figure it out.
I have a question. real quick. So you mentioned something about JAs being the ones to lead the students to the club fair, but what if the JAs are at a booth, like pitching? How would that work? Would you like, would the club leader like step out and like bring the club members, I mean the freshmen in, or like would they just kind of stay there and have somebody else bring them in?
That is a wonderful question. I don't have an initial response for you, but something for us to definitely consider as we continue planning, because we know that our most engaged individuals are often engaged in various extracurricular ways that often overlap. That's a really great point. Thanks for bringing that up, Martha. Anything else? Well, it's been wonderful connecting with you. As I said earlier, lots of great ideas and great insights. We don't intend to connect again via video about the Clubs and Orgs Fair. We don't intend not to either. So if we get to a point where we really think that we could use another session like this, we'll definitely send out an email. We may send out another survey just to gauge interest in certain ideas that came out here. And we'll definitely be sharing this probably tomorrow, along with another advisement to update the club directory. But thanks y'all for joining us. We really appreciate it. And, you know, literally, you know, we might be sort of, Jen and I might be the quote unquote staff members, but campus life, it's corny to say it out loud, but literally doesn't exist without all of y'all. So we appreciate you. We can't wait to see you again in person in a few short weeks. And we're excited to get this year off, this very unusual year off to a start.
Thanks everyone so much. We look forward to working with you.
Thanks y'all. Bye.